Hello all, my name is Ash Bissoy from grade 8 and here I have brought you the second physics chapter and chapter 12 of our science textbook, Friction. So, friction is our chapter for today. So let us start. So, first you have to know what is friction. Friction is the force that acts upon the motion of any object. When any object is in motion, then it has also a direction. As we know, force moves with a direction. So, friction is just the opposing force of the motion or of the direction in which it's coming. Example, if anything is going in towards the right hand side, then there's a friction going to act on the left hand side trying to stop the object. That's why when a ball is rolling on the ground, it stops after some time. So that means that whenever any object is moving in a direction, then there's a opposing force that tries to stop it or resist it that comes when two objects rub against each other. And what are the factors? We'll be seeing the factors. Factors. The factors that are friction. First factor is the nature of the ground. Like any object on the surface. So first one is surface. So if the surface is rough, then the friction is gonna increase. And if the surface is smooth, then the friction is going to decrease. Because friction occurs when there are irregularities. Now we'll be seeing this. Suppose this is the ground or this is the surface. So you can see that this surface has irregularities. That means it's not a straight line. It has some bends and structures in them. And when any other object comes upon this, then they also keep. So they interlock each other. So when two things come in contact with each other, their irregularities get interlocked, and because of which it decreases the motion. And this is what is friction. So we can know that the surface acts as the main factor of the friction. If it is a rough surface, that means the friction is going to increase, and if it's a smooth surface, that means the friction is going to decrease. Second factor is weight. This is not a main factor, but still it affects. If the weight of an object increases, then the friction also increases, because these interlockings become more powerful and we need a more force to move, because the weight has also increased and the interlocking have become more powerful, because of which more power is required. Now we'll be going and seeing how it is useful. So now we'll be seeing that is friction required or it's not required. For this we have to see if it's needed or it's an evil. So friction also has two parts. It is beneficial, and with that it's also an evil. How is it beneficial? It helps us to hold things. Its benefits. When things get interlocked, then only they can be held. So for holding things we need friction, for walking, and for all daily use purposes we need friction, because we can only hold things when there is friction. And how is it an evil? That means how it is disadvantage and its demerits. It wears out things. That means when you're walking on any road, you can see that the sole of your of any type of footwear you're using, it starts to wear out. This is because the friction that acts on the road. You know, road and surfaces are very rough, and when you walk on them, it starts to wear out. That's why you have to change your you have to change it out. Second, heat. When friction acts, heat is produced. Sometimes this heat is very very useful. Like when you rub your palms, it's used, and but it can also be harmful. That whenever anything is getting rubbed, then it can produce fire because of the heat. So we can use this heat for lighting matches. When we light match, it's a friction on the type of structure you can see on the matchbox, and when you hit it, then the friction is caused, and because of this friction, heat is produced and the match gets ignited. So this is very useful. And when a machine is operated, then heat is generated and causes much wastage of energy. This is one of the demerits of the heat that is produced. And when you are using a mixer, it becomes hot because it produces heat when it comes in use. Now we'll be seeing how to increase and reduce the friction. So as we know how friction increases. Friction increases when the surface on which it's acting becomes more rough. So the best possible way of increasing the friction is to increase the roughness of the surface. So at times we rub and make the surface more rough so that the friction increases, and that's why you can see that your shoes have grooves. Why are these grooves required? So that the friction increases with the ground and your shoe and you can walk properly. But at times when it's not grooved, there are chances of slipping and falling down because the friction is low. And why are the wheels of cars treated? It's treated so that the friction increases, and because of the increased friction, the car can move smoothly. So increase can be done by increase in roughness. Okay, now we'll see how to decrease. At times the friction is undesirable or unwanted, so we have to decrease. When you're playing carom board, you put powder to make the board smooth and to play more better. But how this powder comes in use and how it helps to decrease the friction is when it's like this. The powder comes in between and fills and makes this a stable, like this. Then the second thing is lubricants. What are lubricants? Lubricants are substances like oil that are put on substances. So any type of liquid that fills the gaps in the irregularities. So it's just like how we saw powder. So lubricants fill these irregularities and causes the decrease in frictions, because when the oil or any liquid or any lubricant fills the irregularities, then they don't interlock each other and friction doesn't occur. But still friction is there, but in a very less amount. That's why you would have seen that when you put your leg on any type of water, then you tend to slip and fall down. Yes. So now we'll be seeing the types of friction. In types of friction, we mainly have 4 types of friction: kinetic friction, static friction, limiting friction, and fluid friction. So what is kinetic friction? The friction that occurs when 2 objects move, and that's the main type. So when 2 objects move and the friction that occurs is called kinetic friction. In that we have 2 subdivisions, that is sliding friction and rolling friction. When anything slides in the friction, then it's called sliding friction, and when the object rolls on a surface, it's called rolling friction. So we should know that sliding friction, the friction in sliding friction is greater than rolling friction, because in sliding friction there is time for the irregularities to get interlocked, but in rolling friction the irregularities don't get the time to interlock each other. That's why sliding friction, you have to put more power for sliding friction to overcome. What is static friction? When 2 objects are in contact with each other, then there's a friction. And that type of friction is when there's an object at constant and you are putting your power, but still you are not able to move that object, then the friction that comes there is static friction. So the friction when two objects are static, it's called static friction. What is limiting friction? The friction that you have to apply, the force that you have to apply to come over the static friction is called a limiting friction. So that's a limited amount of friction that you have to overcome to move the object. And what is fluid friction? Fluid friction is also called drag. So fluid friction is also called drag. So where does fluid friction occur? It occurs in fluids. Fluids includes gases and liquids. So there is pressure, there is friction in air and water too. How in air? Air resistance is known as the friction in air. When an object moves against the flow of wind, then that causes a resistance, and that's called the friction in air. And how in liquids? Liquids, you know that when you move against the current of a water, or when you push against the water, you're resisting against the water, and that's called friction. That's when there are objects made in streamlined structures to overcome this friction. Streamlined structures have a pointed endings and a broad in the middle, just like how we have seen an aeroplane, like this, even a fish. This is a streamlined structure. See here, they are pointed ends, and in the middle it's a broad part. So these is called streamlined structures. Birds, fishes, and racing cars all have streamlined structures to overcome air resistance or either water resistance. Now we have ended our chapter 12 of our science textbook, that is friction. It is a pretty easy and a very important chapter too, and it's a very important chapter in physics. So if you liked it, then please like the video and please subscribe the channel too, and click the bell icon to be updated with my new videos. And share it with your friends so that even they can get the knowledge, and also they can clear the fundamentals about this chapter too. Thank you.